Good evening and welcome to this BCS Learning Development Specialist Group meeting. This evening we're going to have a session on the archives of IT with our guest presenter Paul Jagger, who's Director of the Archives. And Paul, I'd like to hand over to you and look forward to the presentation.
Kevin, thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to give a brief tour here of Archives of IT. So this project here, Archives of IT, is something I got involved in 2 years ago now. And the more I get involved, the more I'm excited about being involved in this. Despite what it says on the tin, the Archives of IT isn't trying to create an archive of the entire of the domain of information technology. So it's not kind of a backup for the internet and every other document and technology that might be out there. We have a particular focus, and that is on capturing the past and inspiring the future, specifically of IT in the United Kingdom, looked at through the lens of the leaders of the industry. You can follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is at the bottom there, at archivesIT, and the website is archivesit.org.uk, which is the principal portal by which people can gain access to the archive. Archives of IT is a charity. Presently, it receives funding in kind from BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT, and also from the Worshipful Company of Information Technologists. So what is it? Well, fundamentally, it's a website. So Archives of IT is a website which captures the past of the UK IT industry and hopes to inspire the future. So future generations that may consider pursuing a career in IT. And we do it through in-depth analysis of the people, and our focus is on the people, the human stories that have been influential in the development of IT in the United Kingdom. So the axis here is people and in the United Kingdom. We believe that this is unique. There are other archival and heritage and history bodies which are involved in the conservation, preservation and education around the history of the technology, specifically the tin, if you like. So the National Museum of Computing and the Computer Conservation Society are among them. There are others, but our focus is really on the human stories. Now, the archive itself is public, it's free to access and always will be, and is very easy to use. What you see here on screen is a screenshot of the landing page of the website, and we'll go and have a look at the website in just a short while. But first, I should probably answer the most fundamental question, and that is, who is it that we're actually interviewing? Well, we've defined it as leaders of UK IT in commerce, research, education, academia, policy making, whether that be at central or local government level, so on and so forth. The best way to illustrate what we mean by a leader of UK IT is to take a look at an example. And here's one photograph of a hopefully very famous lady within the IT community. Any suggestions as to who this individual might be? Anyone want to chip in and give a suggestion?
Sorry, I don't know. Kevin?
I was trying to look at a picture. Is it Steve Shirley?
It certainly is.
Yes.
Dame Stephanie Shirley, Companion of Honour, to give her full title. Past President of BCS, past Master of the Worshipful Company of Information Technologists. Someone who was an absolute pioneer in bringing women into the IT industry, or rather bringing them back into the IT industry, as women were very prevalent in the IT industry in the very early days in the United Kingdom. She's since gone on to be a philanthropist, and I was privileged summer year before last to attend the honorary doctorate ceremony at Cambridge University, at which Dame Stephanie became an honorary doctor of Cambridge, along with one other luminary of the UK IT industry, a lady by the name of Sophie Wilson, who's most famous for having co-developed the ARM processor and was one of the original developers involved in the BBC Micro project. Anyway, so this is an example of one of the leaders that we've interviewed, Dame Stephanie Shirley. There are many others in the archive. As of this moment in time, there are 66 interviews published, another 31 at various stages in the publication process. So somewhere between initial contact and ready to press the publication button. And there is a long list of circa 300 other candidates that Archives of IT plans to interview. If we explore the archive in a short while, you'll get a good sense of the spectrum of characters that we have interviewed thus far. So moving on, some other examples that I would like to draw your attention to, just three selected from amongst many. So three other luminaries of the industry here. Again, any suggestions for who these characters might be, starting with the one on the left-hand side, so the lady with the red hair.
I know the left-hand one is Sue Black.
Yeah, Sue's difficult to miss. In the centre there, I've already mentioned the name of the other person who was influential in the design and development of the first ARM processor. So that's Professor
Steve Ferber. Yeah.
And on the right-hand side, another past president of BCS and someone whose area of IT specialism is becoming an omnipresent part of our modern working world and will continue to be so and increase over the next decade or so, and that is Sir Nigel Shadbolt, whose area of specialism, artificial intelligence. So for each character in the archive, they have a small kind of like a top trumps card, if you like, a little, just a brief summary of who they are and what their major achievements are. And then behind that, there is a detailed abstract, and then behind that, there is an interview which has been transcribed. The interviews typically last between 90 minutes and 2 hours. They follow a particular formula. We look at the full life of the individual, from family background, early upbringing, education, career, if they're retired, post-career activities, their achievements, the lessons they learned, the mistakes that they made, the things that they would rather have done differently, and the thoughts and recommendations they would have for future generations. So these are but three examples amongst many. What I would like to do now is skip to the website. Take you on a brief tour. So this is the landing page of the website. Just bring that up to full screen. Archives of IT. So you can see there's a kind of revolving index here of some of the recent interviews that we've conducted. Necessarily, some of the interviewee candidates are quite elderly, so we've gone for some of the oldest ones first. But as we've captured the older generation, certainly those that were eminent during the 50s and 60s, we've been able to shift our focus more towards some of those who are perhaps still active in their careers, and even some of the more emerging leaders. So I won't go through the whole of the website, but let me just take you to a few examples. So if I click here on the link to interviews, let's go and have a look. So you can see that you can search by business sector, sector of IT, or a particular decade. Let's perhaps go and have a look. Whoops. For whatever reason, that drop down is not working at present. That's probably something to do with the fact that I've got this zoomed full screen. But let's go and have a look in some depth, perhaps, at Sue Black, one of those three characters that I highlighted earlier. So here we go, we see a few photographs. The interviewee gets to decide which photographs they wish to have linked to their profile. We have some simple biographical data. Actually, the process of interviewing captures rather more biographical data than this, which we are keeping for historical research purposes. But for GDPR reasons, we don't display that on the website. Then for each interviewee, you have this abstract. The structure of the abstract will change depending on the nature of the interviewee. Some of them, of course, are still in the full flush of their career, so they don't have, for example, post-career activities. But in general, they will follow this structure. So there'll be a early life, education, and something about their major achievements. So Sue's been very active in BCS Women. She launched Tech Mums, so on and so forth. Now, that's just a synopsis or an abstract of Sue's career and achievements. With each of the interviews, there are a number of tags, and we've defined a taxonomy here. This is growing, so you can search by, for example, decade or particular area of practice, so education and research in this case. Now, behind this is a deep interview. We captured an audio interview with every candidate. We then transcribed the audio to British Library standards, and that transcription is then held within the archive. For anyone that wishes to gain access to the transcription and other associated content, we do accept materials from the interviewees, such as, but not limited to, things like company reports, white papers, articles that they may have published, anything they feel that adds colour and depth to their interview, then we put that into the archive. In order to gain access to it, all you have to do is register. Registration is free. There's no limits on who can register, but we do require you to register in order to gain access to the transcription and the other documents associated with the interview. Okay, so let's go back to the interviews. We could go into any of these and look in more depth, but I'm just going to go on a quick tour here to give you a sense. Let's agree to that, sorry. Give you a sense of who we've interviewed. So Sherry Kutu is another very eminent female IT practitioner. Steve Ferbers, compatriot of his at Acorn Computers, Chris Curry. And I know that we've recently been in discussions with Sir Clive Sinclair about interviewing him as well. So he's somewhere in the process. Not all of these names are necessarily going to be familiar to you, and there are some here that I was blissfully unaware of their careers until I read their stories. Another compatriot of Chris Curry and Steve Ferber, Dr. Herman Hauser. So on and so forth. So you can get a good sense of the sort of characters that are in the archive. One that I particularly enjoyed interviewing myself is this gentleman here, Professor Frank Land, who has an absolutely phenomenal personal story as an evacuee from Germany pre-World War II. Came to the United Kingdom, eventually went to LSE, and was one of the pioneers involved in the development of Leo, Lions Electronic Office. So he was in computers before we even knew what computers were. Still very much with us today is Frank, and active in the Leo Computer Society. Okay, I think that's enough of touring the interviews in the archive. This list will inevitably continue to grow, and I expect that early next year we will past the 100 mark of interviews published. Just to look at one other aspect of the archive, occasionally we curate a story. So this is more of a sort of an editorial article on some aspect of the development of the industry in the United Kingdom. We don't do too many of these, and we tend to focus on things which are significant journeys in the development of the industry. So, for example, we have the story of ICL, the BBC Computer Literacy Project, which created a generation that could code, the history of BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT, and so on. Let's go and have a look at this one here, only because I'm very proud of having contributed this one myself. So the BBC Computer Literacy Project was certainly influential in my decision to get into IT. And this article here is the sort of level of detail that you would expect to find in a sort of an in-flight magazine. So it's fairly easy to read, provides a high-level summary of the major events in the BBC Computer Literacy Project and some of the leaders to whom we have links within the archive. So this will grow. In fact, there's one missing there because we have since interviewed Steve Ferber. I know we've also interviewed Professor Andy Hopper, who's the head of computing at Cambridge. We're waiting for his interview to be published, but Steve Ferber's is published, so I must let our web editor know that a link needs to be added there. And we have in plan also to interview Sophie Wilson. Okay, so those are just two aspects of the archive. The interviews is the primary focus, but from time to time we curate these stories which cover a particular journey in the development of the industry. I think that's all I want to cover of the website for now. Any questions before I come to a close?
No, it sounds really interesting and something that I'm looking forward to spending some time looking through.
So this is a very long-term, slow-burn project. Clearly, we are not going to interview the 300+ candidates that we have in, on our long list of potential interviewees in the next year or so. And the list will continue to grow as new leaders come to the fore. There are a few ways in which you may consider helping the archives of IT. The first one, the simple one, is just spread the word. Please do tell your colleagues about the archive, invite them to come and visit, to register. As I say, it's free, it's open to anyone, and it's very simple to use. I would be surprised if there is any practitioner in the industry today in the United Kingdom who does not know of at least 3 or 4 of the leaders who have been interviewed in the archive. Their stories are fascinating, and there are many lessons to be learned, both things that you may wish to emulate and things that you may wish to avoid that these leaders have shared in the archive. Do follow us on Twitter at Archives IT. If you're on LinkedIn, you'll find that I have an Archives IT LinkedIn profile, but it's a personal profile for Director of Archives, and you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. We also welcome suggestions for people to interview. Now, one of the biggest challenges that often we run into is actually making contact with people, so we're not short of suggestions. So if you do bring forward a suggestion, we'll certainly actively consider it and get back to you very quickly. If we determine that person fits within the spectrum of leaders within the archive, then we will come back to you, and please be ready to make an introduction, because the simple exercise of making contact with these people is probably the biggest operational challenge that the archive has. We can't promise to interview absolutely everyone that may be suggested. We are both resource constrained, and we do have a criteria for how we define who a leader is. And the best way to determine whether the person you have in mind is likely to to be a good candidate to join the archive is to look at the existing interviews and think to yourself, would they sit comfortably in this peer group? Another way that you can help is to volunteer. We're always looking for volunteers to assist us. We have quite an extensive team of volunteers at present, but we welcome more. Those volunteers support us in many different ways, from conducting research to writing abstracts, to writing stories, to assisting with the website, so on and so forth. There are many ways in which you can dip in if you so desire. If you have a particular interest and flair for interviewing, then we're also interested in building up our interviewer base. There is a fairly rigorous process for identifying, selecting and onboarding potential interviewers, and that is a paid consulting engagement. So we do actually pay both a professional fee and expenses for interviewers. But again, we're quite selective about who we choose to do that. As you've seen, they're going to be meeting some pretty eminent people, and they would be expected to interview to British Library standards. And the last thing you can do is, if you get onto our website, there's even a donation link if you'd like to make a financial contribution to the work of Archives of IT. Once again, emphasize Archives of IT is a charity. Okay, I think that's it from me. If you do nothing else, just have a tour of the archive. I personally find it a fascinating resource. I've learned a great deal about it, and the more that I'm involved, the more I'm excited about being involved. Any closing questions?
No, doesn't sound like it. So I'd like to say thank you very much, Paul. It's very interesting, the work that's going on, and look forward to the Learning Development Group getting more involved with it.
Thank you. More than welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to pause the recording now.